What's the most awkward thing that's happened at a sleepover? Camping in the backyard with some friends when I had to pee super bad. I couldn't find the zipper to the tent to get out and I was about to burst. So I ended up trying to pee through the mesh window. I don't know why. Well, peeing through mesh doesn't work very well, especially with terrible 9-year-old aim, and I ended up laying a pretty thick layer of atomized urine all over everyone else in the tent. In the morning, it turns out one of my other friends was awake, pretending to be asleep, and saw the whole thing, and told everyone it was me who peed all over everything in the tent. Dude was awake while he was getting piss all over him and said nothing. What the fuck, man? Needless to say, I was not invited to another sleepover for quite a while. Probably about 14, this girl decided to have a big slumber party for her birthday. Well, she was stereotypically uncool, wore t-shirts with wolves on them, bragged about how far she could stick the arm of her glasses up her nose, and kind of always smelled like dogs. I was about one social rung above her. My friend and I were the only people that showed up at her big party. Her mom made us hot dogs, and dinner was silent. Her dad arrived and started screaming about how her two gigantic German Shepherd hadn't gotten enough affection today. He ended up throwing a hot dog at the girl's mother. Later on, I made a joke of the word gracias as grassy ass because I was 13. Her dad pulled me into the kitchen and screamed at me. I was shaken up and scared, so we all went to bed. In the middle of the night, my friend and I woke up with the girl sitting up right between us and shaking us awake. We tried to figure out what was going on, and she just said, we could kiss. Having no interest in such things at that age, I was thoroughly disturbed. My friend called her mom and claimed we were sick and had to be picked up immediately. It was just too much discomfort for one night. When I was about 7 or 8, me and a few friends were sleeping in a tent in my best friend's or neighbor's front yard. His dad was a bit of an alcoholic, quite similar to Randy Marsh, actually. Anyways, his dad comes home from the bar plastered, bursts into the tent, and wakes us all up, saying we should all go up to the elementary school across the street. We go with him, the whole time acting like spies, avoiding all the lights, all under his drunk-ass directions. We got to the playground, and he decides he wants to challenge all of us to a foot race. So we line up, he yells, "Go!" and we all take off. Surprisingly, he kept up with us almost all the way to the finish line, before he busted his ass, fell flat on his face, on concrete. He also landed awkwardly on his arm, breaking his wrist. Was awkward at the time, but looking back on it 20 years later, it's quite hilarious. One time I was over at a friend's house for his 11th birthday. It was myself, the birthday boy, and 3 other guys. We all slept in our sleeping bags in the basement. At around 5 a.m., we all awake to find Jake yelling at the birthday boy Derek. The reason? Derek thought it was funny to take a piss on Jake's face while he was sleeping. And Jake freaked out. Jake walked out right after that, while the rest of us stayed up and called our parents around 7. I went home around 8, and in that time, Derek was still trying to play it off as funny. Derek lost 4 friends that night. 13 or 14 years old, all-night RPG session, pen and paper, with my buddies in my friend's basement. His awesome and very traditionally Chinese mom brings us course after course of food throughout the evening as I vainly try to GM an adventure where my friends are more interested in creating in-game simulations of being drunk. GURPS had a skill for that, like everything else, than in actually playing the game. The night wears on and we finally pass out with dawn quickly approaching. Shortly afterward, I wake up with a start. My stomach didn't like the awesome Chinese food as much as the rest of me did. Jump up off the basement floor and bolt for the bathroom, only I'm really tall and have a problem with passing out when I get up too quickly. black out in the doorway, and fall hard. Wake up a moment later with my friends standing over me. That's when it hits me. That looming feeling of dread when you realize that you had just shit your pants in front of a room of your peers. Is this real or am I dreaming? These terror-filled thoughts are interrupted by a renewed gurgling in my stomach. Apparently, it is all too real. I claw my way into the bathroom and slam the door shut on my startled friends. I pull my pants down and unleash a foul kind of hell on the toilet, even as shit continues to soak into my ill-fitting jeans. This happened in the 90s. But wait, there's more. Suddenly, I need to vomit because this delicious food apparently can't leave my body fast enough. I do the only rational thing that can be done and start puking into the garbage can as I continue to add on to the mountain of poop underneath me. Apparently, I had offended some vengeful deity on that day because, obviously, the basket is wicker. So there I am, pooping everything that can be pooped as I vomit into a garbage can that is, at best, straining it. The floor is covered in vomit, my pants are full of shit, and that's the day my social anxiety started. Welcome to the next decade of your life, kid. When I was like 11, my mom made friends with this chick at her work who had a daughter the same age as me. There were a few times where her mom and my mom would hang out and bring us along, so we were kind of friends. Anyways, the girl has a birthday party / sleepover and invites me. We didn't go to school together, so I didn't know any of the other girls she had over. There was 4 other girls. So we eat pizza, swim in our pool, sleepover stuff. So later in the night, after her mom and her mom's boyfriend had gone to bed, we're all hanging out in her room just talking about weird preteen shit while listening to music. So the TV is on, but since we have music on too, the TV is on mute. I don't know who put it on or how long it had been out, but in the middle of our conversation, this girl says, "Oh my god, look at the TV." It was some softcore Cinemax porn, and the room just went silent. So this other girl asks if any of us had ever come. Most of us are like, no. So then she asks if we know how. Again, we're all like, no, not really. So this girl grabs a pillow and starts humping it while we all just sit there. Sean Paul's Temperature was playing in the background. I was sleeping over at my cousin's house. We stayed up and snuck out into the living room to watch Cinemax. It was after midnight, and back in those days, that was when all the titty flicks came on. One came on that my cousin was really into. He started touching his raging erection in his pajama pants, and then he let out a blood-curdling scream. Somehow he ruptured a vein or something in his peen. We had to go wake up his mom. She looked at it and decided we had to go to the emergency room. Our whole family still makes fun of him for that until this day when we get together. About 11 years ago, sleepover with girls and boys. All lights are out for about 10 minutes. We have all settled down and gotten silent for sleeping. Then, we hear a grown male voice clearly enunciate the word, "what?" Now, let me be clear, this was not a child's voice. This was like hearing James Earl Jones say, "what?" There was about a 10-second silence, and then one of the girls says, "Who said that?" Silence. Then one of the boys starts laughing uncontrollably. We turn the lights on and he is laughing so hard that he's crying. Here we are, all freaking out about some strange man in our room while we sleep, and he's pissing himself laughing. He finally calms down enough to tell us that it wasn't a person who asked, "what?" He farted the word. His fart sounded exactly like the word "what?" We all cracked up. To this day, everyone from that party still answers phone calls from each other with, "what?" It was first grade, my first sleepover party. We were watching one of the Star Wars movies and talking Pokemon cards. We were all having a great time. Bedtime rolls around and my dad has to bend over to turn the VCR off. As he crouches down, he lets rip a fart so thunderous Thor would have cowered right into the face of my best friend at the time. Man, I go to sleep and wake up to a ton of little orange envelopes. Because, some of you have asked, no, that is not what ended my friendship with the kid. Though his dad and my dad are really good friends now, so I can't help but wonder if they bonded over that. I think we were all around 15. About 6 male friends came over for your typical high school sleepover. Pizza, soda, and video games until 3 in the morning, and everyone just passes out where they lie. Except something must have been in the air that night because almost everyone was getting sexual. It started with jokes about sword fights in the bathroom, then a couple of them actually went into the bathroom to piss and cross the streams. Or so they say, I didn't verify. Then, at one point, 5 of them, 6th was passed out, basically started comparing dick sizes. And I backed out. I had my reasons. I was a closeted bisexual and in denial, and the last thing I wanted was to be ostracized in a class that was only about 20 students. So yeah, kind of odd that the inadvertently gayest experience of my life happened in my bedroom, and I backed out. I was out camping with a neighbor friend of mine when we were 14. I woke up hearing the shuffle of her sleeping bag. I asked her what she was doing, and without breaking a stride, she said that she was warming herself up. Then I turned on the lamp and found her on top of her bag, naked and masturbating. She immediately stopped and pulled her sleeping bag up over herself, and she turned out the lamp. We sat there in silence for about 3 minutes. Then I said, "You can finish if you wanna." "No, you ruined it." We didn't speak for the rest of the trip. When I was 12, my friend Peter had a disco-themed birthday party. No, I don't know why. At his house. The party being on a Friday, we all stayed the night. Being preteen boys with limitless cola, we ended up staying up all night and decided to watch the sunrise on his back deck. As we're looking at the majestic, slowly lightening sky, our peaceful moment is shattered by a shrill, screaming voice. Looking to the source of the sound, we see his fat, topless, 50-plus-year-old neighbor lady yelling through her kitchen window that we're degenerate perverts. She was under the impression we were all staring at her. Once the yelling started, we really couldn't help it, and that horrible image will be forever burned into my mind. I'm 29 now. I have a story of embarrassing sleepwalking while blackout drunk. While I was around 15, I was staying the night at one of my best friend's houses. We decide to steal a bottle of whiskey from his parents' kitchen and walk down to the park down the street to drink it. It was around 10 p.m. I immediately started taking big chugs, dead sober, and no tolerance. About 30 minutes later, I was blackout drunk, but do remember small tidbits. We climbed the roof of the elementary school nearby, right next to the park, and tried to break into the classrooms. Eventually, I became somewhat belligerent and my friend got annoyed. It took him about an hour to get me to leave with him. This is where my memory fades completely. We walk back into the house and apparently my friend told me to just lay down on the couch in his living room. At this point, he was really fed up with how drunk I was and just wanted to go to sleep. He said I agreed and laid down on the couch as he went to his room. And this is where things get a little weird. I get up in the middle of my sleep and I walk into his older brother's room and just stared at him in his sleep. My friend had just changed rooms a week ago with his older brother, so I guess in my blackout stupor, I assumed it was still his room. He wakes up and asks me what the hell I'm doing. I say nothing and proceed to lay on the floor. His brother is weirded out, but decides to just leave me be and let me sleep on the floor, probably assuming I'm drunk. About an hour later, according to him, he awakens to me rolling around and puking all over his floor. At this point, I am entirely incoherent, so he decides to just deal with it in the morning and leave me be. About an hour or so after that, I get up and walk into his parents' room across the hall and start puking all over their floor. His parents are pissed, needless to say, but somewhat understanding. His mom gets up, cleans up the puke, I am completely blacked out, and takes me to the shower. She takes my clothes off, except for my underwear, and puts me in the shower and turns it on. This is all according to her. God knows what exactly happened and what I was saying. For all I know, my dick was popping out of my boxers. I never felt the need to ask. Anyways, the next morning I woke up in his basement with nothing but underwear on that is stiff from dried puke, with virtually no memory after we decided to try and break into the school. I talked briefly about what had happened with him and his family as I grabbed my clothes and left. Most embarrassing nights of my life. This was both awkward and kinda scary. I was 8 or 9 years old. My friend was having a birthday party, and a bunch of us were sleeping over in the basement. The basement itself was pretty creepy, and we had spent much of the night telling horror stories until we eventually went to sleep. At around 2 a.m., we were woken up by one of the girls stomping up and down the stairs. She was yelling and crying. I can't remember what she was yelling specifically, but it was basically nonsense. It basically looked and sounded like she was possessed. A few of the girls started asking her to go back to sleep, and she basically just angrily screamed no and continued going up and down the stairs. Finally, she eventually stopped without a word and walked back to bed. Found out in the morning that she had been sleepwalking, and on top of it, had wet the bed. She was really embarrassed, and we all felt really awkward at breakfast that morning. TLDR, friend woke us all up acting like she was possessed by some kind of demon, turned out to be sleepwalking, and peed the bed. My friend in high school had the house where all of our friends would play Smash Bros. Tournaments until our eyes bled, then go to sleep in his massive RV parked outside. I wasn't, and still am not, a morning person, so I'd usually be the last one out of the RV. One night I fall asleep on the pull-out bed in my jeans and all with just a blanket covering me. As I wake up, I'm still in that half-awake, half-asleep haze, and I feel something rustling in my nether regions. I figure it's just morning wood and go back to sleep. Then it happens. I feel it again, and wake up for real this time, and my dick is outside of my zipper. Pants still on, blanket still covering. As I look over, my friend is laying next to me, he and I being the only two in the RV, staring directly at the ceiling. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt and prayed he didn't just pull my penis out of my pants while I was asleep, so I packed up and headed home. Lo and behold, an hour later, I get a text saying he was so sorry he didn't know what he was thinking. Yeah, man, you pulled my dick out of my pants while I was sleeping. I'm gonna need a little space. I came out of the closet during a sleepover, was sharing a waterbed with 2 other dudes, and 3 more were sleeping on the floor. I just came right out with it, and they all just kinda reacted with, and talked about something else. I thought they just accepted it right there, and it wasn't a problem. It was a huge relief for me that they brushed it off without any issues, too. Ended up finding out last year, I was 13 when this happened, 20 now, that it was super awkward for everyone else, and that's why they changed the subject so fast. It wasn't at all awkward for me, but for them it was. Sorry, guys. Although, the guy in the middle of me and another friend whispered in my ear that he was bi, and we stealth cuddled a bit, so doesn't matter, hag cuddles, I guess. Does a Boy Scout trip count? Well, if it does, here goes. I was in Boy Scouts in an inner city area. The older kids were dicks. Well, my first weekend trip, my dad loaded me up on goodies to share. I fell asleep and the older kids raided my bag and took just about everything, so it sucked, but whatever. I go home and tell my dad, and he was pissed, but really composed, which was odd for my Irish longshoreman dad. So next month is my trip, and my dad made a big batch of brownies but told me not to eat any or share with my friends. He told me leave them in my bag like I did last time. Sure enough, I woke up and they were gone, and 3 kids were shitting themselves like crazy. Yep, my pops X-laxed the brownies. He showed up that same morning to the campsite with another goodie bag for me to share. Never had my bag raided again. TLDR, older Boy Scouts robbed my treats, so my dad literally made them shit themselves. Mine are all things that I did. I had a sleepover with my old best friend and her new best friend. I was jealous and felt left out the whole time. That night I wet the bed and we never hung out again. When I was younger, I used to puke if I ate eggs, even scrambled. And my friend's dad made eggs. I was trying to be polite and eat them, but I couldn't keep them down and ran to the bathroom right off the dining room to throw up his nice breakfast. Third one, and most mortifying. I was at a friend's house and got my period. I was wearing a thong and she didn't have any tampons, just huge pads. So I tried to make it work anyway. The next day, we were all sitting on the computer, and there were only seats for 2 of us, so I sat on one girl's lap. After a while, I got up and realized I bled through my jeans and all over her leg. She laughed her ass off, thankfully, instead of being disgusted. Her mom had me sit on a towel when she drove me home. I've always done weird things in my sleep. I still do, but thankfully not as often. I scream, I get up and take a shower, I go in the kitchen and make a sandwich. But when I was younger, read elementary age, I used to strip while I was sleeping. I would wake up and my Scooby-Doo nightgown would be underneath my pillow. It was weird. So one night, me and some 10 other girls were spending the night at my friend's house because it was her birthday. We were having fun, eating cake, watching movies, blah, blah, blah. We all fell asleep while watching some movie. In the morning when we all wake up, I'm still half asleep and I get out of my sleeping bag and stand up and stretch in front of everyone. But naked. Some 10 to 15 years later, and my friends have still not let that one go. My mom had this close friend who had a kid almost exactly my age, 3 weeks younger. When things weren't good with my dad, Mom would take my brother and I to their place for a sleepover. We kids all slept in the same room, and once my brother was asleep, he'd molest me. I somewhat enjoyed it, and that made me feel awkward and embarrassed. It still does. Both of us had been interfered with separately by adults, so I suppose I equated it with affection. This happened when I was 8. Despite enjoying what he did, I still hated going there. Part of me knew that it wasn't right. Plus, she made me stew every fucking night. I hated it. Took me years to not associate stew with awful things. Well, that wasn't very lighthearted. Sorry, guys. Back when I was big into getting high, my friend wants to hang out, which meant smoking pot, so I agree. It's important to note that for whatever reason, this friend always got a boner from smoking. Weird. So we're at his house, high as fuck, and we decide to watch a movie. It's also important to note that we are on 2 separate couches. About 20 minutes into the movie, I noticed the guy rubbing his crotch over his pants. Seriously. Weird. He gets up and goes to the bathroom, so I assume he's just going to wank it out in private, and that'll be that. To my surprise, he decides the more appropriate action to take is to get stark naked and run like a madman towards his couch, and then proceed to fuck the couch. I saw this all out of the corner of my eye, and I tried to just watch the movie, but the shit was too whack. I burst out in awkward laughter, like a mix of "what the fuck, man" style of disbelief, and a little bit of sadness and terror. I don't let him live this down.